Well, hello there. I'm the Mad Artist, and sometimes I like to read crazy stories, and I wanted to share some of these with you. Today we cover Tycho Brahe, an astronomer from the Renaissance period. Now I know what you're thinking. How dull, right? But no, stick with me. He was an astronomer for sure, but he was more like a Disney villain crossed with a partying frat boy, and that's why I was so interested. So let's get started. So, first off, he was a genius. At 12, he started university, originally studying law, but during his stay there, he saw a solar eclipse and was pissed that it was a day later than was predicted by the court astronomers. So he just up and gave up his law studies and decided to become an astronomer to better predict events like these. And at the time, becoming an astronomer was not exactly a reputable or profitable profession, so people thought he was rightfully insane. He was raised by his uncle, whose name I can't pronounce, so I'm not even gonna try. Anyway, his uncle was like, "No, I want you to be a civil servant, none of this useless astronomy bullshit." But Tycho used his charm and wit to talk his uncle into letting him study astronomy, and so he did. And this was just one of the first times Tycho would be a crazy rebel. Tycho was also a partier, as we'll learn, something he picked up from his uncle. As an example, in Tycho's teenage years, his uncle went partying with the Danish king. The king got so drunk that he fell into the freezing water, and Tycho's uncle leapt in after him to try and save him, which he did, but then his uncle contracted pneumonia from the act, and died a few weeks later. As you'll see, partying seems to be the downfall of this entire family. At 20, Tycho went to study medicine at the University of Rostock and had his own party mishap. One night, while drinking very heavily, he got into an argument with a fellow student over who was the better mathematician. Such a rebel, I tell you. The two of them decided, in their completely rational and sober brains, to get into a sword fight to settle their dispute, and as a result, Tycho lost his nose. Yes, that's right, his nose. And for the rest of his life, Tycho had to wear a fake nose made out of gold and silver. Although later it was found out that this was actually made of brass, but he was a little boastful and he claimed it was silver and gold. Later in life, Tycho fell in love with a commoner woman, and his noble bloodline made it illegal at the time to marry her. So, like the rebel he was, he did the unthinkable and just lived with her, pretending that they were husband and wife. This was despite the fact that it was completely against the wishes of the church and was possibly the first turning point where he started to become just a little bit of a villain. In 1572, he made his first major astronomical discovery when he identified the first known supernova in the Cassiopeia constellation, although no one knew what it was at the time. He published his findings in a book, and the mainstream astronomers of the time thought he was mistaken in his discovery because it was believed that the sky was unchangeable, so discovering a new object was just impossible. But ever the rebel villain, in the dedication to the book that he published, debunking everything that the mainstream was saying, he directly addressed all the other astronomers of the day, calling them thickwits and blind watchers of the sky. Tycho was also a nobleman, and when he got his inheritance, he became super rich. He had his own castle on his own private island, and was known to have harshly taxed all of his feudal subjects, essentially making him an emperor of his own little country. And while doing all of this, he became the royal astrologer and alchemist for the king, basically turning him into the equivalent of the evil court wizard of Denmark. Then, like a true Disney villain, when a new king took the throne, the kingdom of Denmark turned on Tycho. His deliberate opposition of the church and his evil taxation of the peasants just didn't fly anymore, so they charged him with heresy for his beliefs in witchcraft. He tried to resist the charges and use his power, influence, and skills, of course, to stay in Denmark, but he was eventually exiled for his crimes and had much of his land stripped from him. Upon leaving Denmark, in true villain style, he wrote a poem to the entire country, calling every Dane a moron for not worshipping his genius. Last but not least, while living in Prague under a new king, still ever the party animal, Tycho went to a banquet in 1601 when he was 54. At the banquet, he refused to use the bathroom, claiming that stopping to pee would interrupt the fun and revelry of the party. After the events, he found himself in unbearable pain and was completely unable to pee, having held it in too long. A little while later, his bladder burst, poisoning his blood, killing him by his own urine. He of course tried to cure himself with magic and alchemy, but it didn't work. On his deathbed, ever the humble person, Tycho wrote his own epitaph. He lived like a sage and died like a fool. And yes, I know that this is an exaggeration of how he died, but this painting was funny to me. Another funny thing about Tycho is that his body was exhumed a few years back in 2010 to confirm his frankly outlandish death, as it was rumored that this was not true and he had really been murdered. I think people just had trouble believing that he died from his bladder blowing up. But scientists in Prague who exhumed him have all but confirmed the tale is true, which makes it all the more interesting to me. So, that was a mad story. I hope you enjoyed. I found it interesting, so I thought I'd share, and hopefully you did too. If you did, please drop a like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I've been the Mad Artist. Catch you next time. Oh my god, why is this hand so big? Ugh, okay. I need to save that one for the blooper reel. That's ridiculous.